Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today it's all about street photography in black and white with darktable. Now this is a subject that's quite close to my heart as I have been doing street photography now for about 10 years. Had a couple of exhibitions recently with kind of a warm welcome to them. Bit of, well, I won't say success, but at least I've had a good reception. And that has been very, very heartwarming to me. Now I'd like to show you how I actually edit the photos, and you might be surprised to find that the module I use the most is one of the most basic ones. I'm called Nicholas, and let's do this together. This first photo was taken in Paris in 2014. You have the EXIF down there at the bottom, taken near the Centre Pompidou. And this is a guy who was there kind of all the time feeding the pigeons. Now, this is the black and white. Now, what's it doing there? Okay, so this is the black and white image that I print, and it is actually a snapshot. And this is the original raw file. So we do have, oh yeah, from one to the other. So you notice the lack of contrast. The well, the image is a little bit more difficult to focus on than the final image. So this is the duplicate, and that's the original here on the left. So we are on the duplicate here, and I'd like to recreate something very close to what I did previously. Now, I will say that every day I'm a different person, and what I'm going to do today will not be the exact reflection of what I did a year or 2 years ago. I actually re-edited all my photos with darktable 4 point, I don't know, maybe, I can't remember which one, 4.8 maybe, just to get a kind of an even look across the board for an exhibition. But the main idea still dates from 2014. What I'd like to do with this photo is give it some punch, some contrast. The first thing I'm going to show you now is how I actually transform images into black and white. So what I'll do is I'll duplicate the color calibration. I'll rename this to BW black and white. So now I have two instances of the color calibration. The first one is used just for the color balance, and that's fine. I'm in black and white, it's fine. I don't think there's very much to do. I mean, I could get some very minor changes if I actually kind of do a measurement. The better the white balance on the original photo, the better control you'll get over the black and white. Anyway, into the black and white, and I'll just go into grey, and then you can just basically pick whatever you like with normalize channels, put lots of green if you want to get the brightness. What I actually do, I'm very lazy with this, is I'll kind of choose maybe the luminance based black and white, and that's done. So what we can notice in on this waveform here is we are pretty dark. So I'm going to increase the exposure quite a lot. Now, why do I have two instances of color calibration? Well, that is ever since we have the magic color equalizer module, which I will turn on here, go back to my list. And what I'm going to do is the color equalizer, I am actually going to press on Control Shift. I'm going to move it down in between the two instances of color calibration. And this will give me control over the colors while still having a black and white. here you see if I increase the brightness of, let's say in the reds here, you can see increasing, decreasing. So I do have control here. Whereas if I put it above black and white, then when I move it up and down, I am actually getting nothing because the image is in black and white. So this hue doesn't exist anymore. So that's the idea behind that. So let's move it in between. And in that way, you see, we are getting, if I press on control, then I'm actually getting like in Lightroom, Photoshop, whatever, the other commercial, well, the other editors will say, I can actually get sliders and I can increase the reds. There, I get some good skin tones. Now, I've forgotten what colour this is, so I'll switch off black and white. Oh, look, it's green. So if I want to darken that, then I need to darken the greens. And I'm darkening the coat. Now, obviously, not quite there. We're kind of in between two. Oh, I can't really get that very dark. Can't get it darker than that. Anyway, see what I'm doing is I will be able to play individually on the colours and kind of work out what I want. This caddy here, what colour is it? It's a red. So I've actually increased the value of the reds. Now, if I wanted to increase the value of kind of the skin tones and decrease the value of the reds in this kind of trolley, then I'd have to have two instances with a mask. And that is perfectly possible. Now, what I made is I have something called skin, which makes me a nice curve. And that will be kind of my basic point for my street photography. It doesn't mean I apply it without thinking, but I'll switch that on and make modifications after that. But that is my way of working because I mean, street photography is all about people, so I can actually get bright skin tones, which means I can darken the rest quite a lot. Now, the second thing I'm going to worry about now is the actual global contrast. As you see, the image is quite flat, and Filmic is the module to go to. So in the scene tab, if I measure the whites, I will actually leave the whites as they are, but the black, I can actually move it for taste. I don't mind kind of having some very dark zones in the image. And I'll also, in the look tab, won't hesitate to change contrast. Now it can be kind of overdone, but I can get some good contrast back with that. And that is I already have a little bit of a change there. You can also use the color balance RGB tool if you want to get contrast, especially in the brilliance, where you can add or reduce contrast. If you want to really darken the dark. So that is a good tool. There's a bit less control, I find. Well, not less control. I find the output is not really as interesting for me as the output in Filmic, but I'm sure each person will find their own tool. Tone equalizer does the same thing. Take the tool you want. I use tone equalizer, well, maybe less, but it's still a very good tool for that if you want to kind of add a bit of contrast here without burning the whites in the mid-tones. There we are. Well, maybe the other way, kind of get an S curve for the contrast. Not too pleasing. That's not what I was going for. But those are the tools anyway, just to show you quickly what is possible. So to recap, all I have done is use color equalizer and Filmic. And now the exposure module I will use again, and I have made here a preset called vignette. And vignette mainly is just a shape. The exposure is reduced, and I've inverted the shape that's selected. So I'll take an ellipse, and I will choose the part of the image that I want to cover. So I'll usually choose the subject. I'll transform that by hand, make it a bit shorter. Choose the subject and get a nice feather and then sometimes I actually go quite wild on the vignette because I want the viewer's eye to focus on the face. So darken the rest around, brighten the skin tones, and then your eye will go straight to the place I want it to. So vignette is something I use quite a lot. What I will use if it's not enough, and I was saying that the tool I use the most is actually the exposure tool. So I'll rename that, and I'll often have a layer of ND grads, which I'll use with a pen, and then I'll make some, if I put a graduated filter on from the bottom, and of get the feathering down a bit, and maybe I can cut that off. And I actually quite often also bend. I actually like the bend on this tool. It's quite unique to darktable. I think it is anyway, and maybe tilt it the other way. Actually, that's what I wanted here. Tilt it the other way, and then when I go down, not too much, I kind of get an extra level of vignetting just in the places I want to. This bottom part of the image doesn't interest me very much. So that is a way to focus the interest. Black and white photography is all about focusing the interest of the viewer exactly where you want it to go, and then having sufficient information, for me anyway, having sufficient things in the photo so that once you've seen that, you know what the photo's about, it's a clear photo. Then after that, you can start looking, you see the bird around here. Oh, look, there's a bird on the arm, something you might not have seen straight away. And then, the eye can roam. And that's how I like to see my photography anyway. Now, the second way to get the viewer's interest in a photo, after what I call the global contrast. So we have the zones of the image that are dark, the zones that are light. So mainly that's global contrast, what's in between is everything that's local contrast. So whether we're talking about sharpness, texture, clarity, local contrast, whatever, it's all the same thing in different degrees. We have several modules, one of which is diffuse and sharpen. Now, maybe I would use the demosaic sharpening, that's for the printing, just as a matter of fact. And maybe I will use the lens deblur on another layer, just as a matter of fact, just to make sure that the sharp areas, are sharp. And it shouldn't affect, in this diffuse or sharpen, shouldn't affect the out of focus areas. That is not kind of the creative part of it. What I will do very often is add a third layer, which I will call, well, actually, I could just use I'll use dehaze, local contrast, whatever you like. What I'd like to do is give some texture kind of to this coat here, to, well, the main character. Now, there are several ways to do that. Dehaze is a good way of doing it. I don't know if you can see before and after, but it is quite significant. Now, if we zoom in, this is quite, oh, wrong image. Where have I gone wrong now? Sorry, back to the light. It changed photo there. What I wanted to do, was to zoom in so we could have a look at the dehaze, the effect of dehaze. So on and off as I go there. Now there's no over sharpening as what I can see. So that is actually not bad. I could actually just leave it like that. And what I would do, however, would be to get a mask just to make sure I'm not over sharpening some parts that I was trying to hide previously. And now the thing, you can't make a mask now based on color because the diffuse and sharpen module is above the black and white. So we can't make a mask based on color unless you've already made the mask in the exposure. And I think I'll have a rant about that a bit later on in this video, because there's something I'd like to see changed in the way that Darktable manages the masks. even if it is one of the best pieces of software for making masks. There's something slightly different I'd like to see. Anyway, I think I'll just make a drawn mask for that. Just a quick drawn mask, just to make sure, as I was saying, that this kind of effect is not going on parts of the images that I'm not interested in. So we can kind of, oh, what was that? Let's close that now. Okay, got a few strange things happening today. Where did that mask go? Okay, well, it's disappeared now. Let's make another one then. Start again. So I want some sharpening. Let's go extend that to the hands and to the coat, kind of down there, not too far in the dark areas. I can reduce the feathering slightly. Show the mask with M, bit of a feathering guide to make sure that nothing is happening out of the places I want it to. And I think there we're fine. So here we have the image as it looks now. How was it before compared to the original, the one I showed you before? Well, you see I'm a bit lighter. You see, I actually managed to get a lot more contrast. And I think I recropped a little bit. You see, there's a little bit missing there. So I had a darker, kind of grittier image. That is just a question of exposure. There's nothing else there. So maybe we can try and recreate that a little bit. Now, I was saying that it's very difficult to get the same thing in two images. What I can do is reduce the contrast a little bit. And maybe try and increase the contrast. I can actually try and use the color RGB. Now, I increase that, and I'll try and increase the highlights. Or maybe something like that. I don't want to lose, you said, I don't want to lose the shadows too much. So maybe just somewhere like there. That makes it grittier. We can check again. I'm not going to spend hours doing this. There's not that much of a difference. The back wall is much more visible. There is something I haven't used yet, and that is the clarity in the highlights. And I made a whole video about that, how to make images pop, if you want to go and look at that. And I have a couple of presets, either detail or clarity and highlights. We'll see how these go. Well, these are not visible at all, so obviously I don't have enough highlights. Okay, so that's a poor example. Now, if we want to get some grit back there, maybe I could use local contrast. Yeah. Well, that's not too bad. As I said, if you start looking for something you already made, it's so difficult. You want to be satisfied with what you've got, I think. I think I'll leave that one there. It's not too bad. I think that the character is kind of visible. I think you can see the details. So that's one example where the image was there. I would try to enhance it. I wasn't making an image. In the second example, I'm going to show you, if you look at the raw file, you think there isn't a photo there really. I'll show you how I actually go around turning that into something kind of a little bit more striking. So this is the second image. So taken one lunchtime in January. So with the sun coming down opposite me. And I'd like to turn it into this more contrast image. There we are with the silhouette. And there's a bit more mystery to it. There we are. So just a few minutes. I hope to get something quite similar. Now, the first thing I start by doing is lens correction and denoise, which I forgot to do in the previous photo. So busy trying to, thinking about something else. And then on this image, I will use rotate and perspective, this button to get the lines, and maybe either I'd try just the first one just to get some uh, vertical lines correct, and this one just to get them horizontal, and this one both. I don't like that. I think I'll go for that. I'll reset that because I don't know what's happening. But I think I like the look of that. As the buildings go, it looks kind of not too shabby. So I will duplicate the color calibration. Now I actually do have a preset that does this. I'll show you an instance of it right at the end of the video. So I'll rename this to black and white. I will insert the color equalizer in between. And there we are, the sandwich. And I will turn this to black and white luminance based. So now just click on the button, color and black and white. And the color equalizer, well, I don't really have skin tones for this, so I really can't see why I do anything particular for skin tones. But I'll save that for later, and I'll go to Filmic. Now we have some very bright whites here. We have some kind of darkish blacks. If I do the auto tune levels, then I'm certain that they're to keep the whites at the maximum and not kind of blow everything out completely. Now the blacks I'd like to be black, but if you see there, I'm kind of on the minimum already. Now you can type in values. I'll go to -6. Now I can go further, but after a bit, I think we're more interested in just getting some kind of look. And let's get some contrast. And here we have the dreaded orange lines. So we'll go to contrast in highlights, safe for contrast in shadows. And now if I want to add contrast, then I can add whatever I like. And I like the way the light's bleeding out over the buildings up here. Now I don't have to go that high, but there we are. We have some kind of very contrast image. And the idea now, you see, is to get rid of all this and just to get everything into darkness. And I want to get some detail back in this area here. So maybe, you see, as exposure goes, if I just move the exposure down, well, hey presto. Well, that was difficult, wasn't it? So I can move that. If I move that down, and now I'll try and get some so I've lost kind of a lot of the detail there. Well, that's not so bad. Let's try and get some detail now, get some interest in this path here, and also a little bit of interest up at the top. Now, what I like to do is kind of get a little bit of work done on this pavement here. Now, the thing I was talking about earlier with the mask manager, you see, well, not the mask manager, but the managing of masks, is that if I make a selection here, then and I want to reuse it for other modules, then I can only reuse it for modules that are below it, well, no, above it in the pipeline. So if I make, let's say, I make a mask in color equalizer, then I can only reuse the mask made here in the modules above. So what I do, and it's a habit now, is every time I want to make a mask, I actually go to exposure and I make the mask in exposure because it's the first module, the first pixel oriented module that there is in the whole pipeline. So as it's the lowest one, then all the other modules being above, I can reuse the mask, which means that sometimes I have examples, I have instances of exposure where there's no modification made to the exposure, but it's just a selection. Because as I don't know when I'm creating a mask exactly what modules I want to use, then I have to make it the lowest possible. And what I would like to do, I'd like to be able to go into the mask manager and I'd like to make a complete mask, not just a shape, make a complete mask with um, parametrics and shapes and intersections, make a mask, give it a name, and then if I could make the mask, then I'd be able to use it in all the modules and in the order I wanted. You see, because for me, I actually think masks, and um, sometimes the modules, the ideas come later. And well, there we are. I'll stop talking now. Let's get on to moving this. But you see what I mean. I'm going to make a mask of the uh, the cobbled, well, the paved street there. Um, what I could do is look at this photo in colour. I'll remove black and white, and as you see, we have some kind of sunlight there. So it's kind of yellow. Maybe I'll be able to pick this up with some hue. Let's choose an area here in the cobbles. Um, click on M, and that is actually not too bad. So I have, I can feather that out. Quite a good selection here of the cobbles. I'll be able to get rid of quite a lot of the parts I don't want. Maybe like that. Now, you might have noticed this in my previous videos, but I'm actually not too bothered about getting pixel perfect masks. I find it kind of, well, most of the time, waste of time. I will, however, use a drawn mask just to avoid doing unwanted things up here in the sky. And I have actually quite a good mask there. Um, and now the mask is made, what do I want to do with it? Well, I want to get some clarity, I want some local contrast. And for that, I'm going to test some dehazing. Now I can actually increase the number of iterations here in the dehaze. That's maybe a little bit too much. I could try dehaze extra contrast, which is actually quite good there. Dehaze extra contrast. Okay, let's leave that like that. I don't particularly like the sharpness on this, so I sometimes, quite often actually remove the sharpness there and then go into a mask, raster mask, exposure street. And that's using the mask I just made in exposure, which I didn't use in exposure. And I actually have some detail there. Maybe now the question is, do I want to let this kind of go out without any detail, or do I absolutely want to get that back? Well, if I want to get it back, there would be a way to do that, is with the tone equalizer. And if I go round to this area, which is past the maximum, if I lower the exposure compensation, then I'm round here, around the maximum, and here we are. You see I'm getting some detail back. There we are, maybe not too much. What I could do is try and get a nice deep U shape there, and then I'll go to raster mask and just street, and there I'm only affecting the part of the image which was in the mask I made previously. Right. Well, that is actually not too bad in my opinion. Let's look after this street because not the street, sorry, the sky, because this is quite distracting. I mean, I know it makes kind of an echo, um, but I'll try and soften that. So I did have a few ideas. One of the ideas I tried was an instance of diffuse and sharpen, and I'll just try typing sky. Now, I don't need to make a mask particularly for that because it's not a difficult one to get. Because mainly I will be in this area of the image round here, and I will be in the brights. So click on M, and then let's try and select. I can move the boost factor up a little bit, just the places where we have, I think we've lost everything else. There we are. Bit of a feathering, maybe a bit of blurring. I could actually feather quite a lot there. I'll try and feather quite a lot. And then basically I want to bloom that. So I should actually use the preset because sometimes I forget how this works. But am I going the wrong way? Now, this is another thing, you see. I always forget this. Oh dear, that's awful. Okay, bloom. There we are. I should know. It was the radial span. Now I've lost the mask, you see. I've lost the mask. I do have a path. But as I used a preset, I've lost the mask. So I can get the mask back. Is that one? Path number 1. Path number 2. Oh dear. Path 2. Path 1. Which one was it? No, it's not path 1. It's path 2. Okay, this is why I'd like to make a mask here. Because if I use a preset, I lose the mask. You can have worked half an hour making a mask. Or maybe not. And you decide to use a preset and you've lost your mask. I have to do that again. Right, it's my fault for kind of not knowing how bloom works. But yes, it's the wrong shape. What am I doing? Right, I don't want that one. There we are. M. This is chaos. Why is that not working? There. Right, okay, we're back. Back in business. I'll try and bloom the sky a little bit. There we are. Make a mask. Bloom on the sky. See before and after. So the way I'm fading the contours makes it less sharp, and if it's less sharp, your eye won't go there as quickly. I don't have any other methods kind of to hide that. Right, so that's kind of not too far, I think, from the other picture. That was the one I made, the first one I made, and this is the second. You see there's a bit of a rotation, not much difference. I think we've recreated that one. Now this is the last image for today. It doesn't look like much. What I'd like to do is turn it into something like this. Now it's obviously much smaller. That's not a good way to do it. Turn it into something like this. Okay, whenever you like, please. There. Okay. So the idea is kind of the thing I saw when I took the photo, but obviously you can't see that in the raw file, is kind of the well, we have kind of a balance between the person who's there and the kind of the clothes, the leopard print on the trousers and on the coat. There's kind of a street going this way, street going that way. I quite like the doorbell. Anyway, it appealed to me. The image is, however, very flat and not very well framed, I'm afraid. That was taken rather quickly. So we have a little bit of work to do. And as you know, the module I will use the most is the exposure module, which is very reminiscent actually of what I know of dark rooms, where you're kind of masking and you're just kind of changing exposure. So nothing new on the planet really from that point of view. So let's get the image straight. C is my shortcut for crop. It should be. The computer's slowing down now. I will crop in 4/3 because I do like the format 4/3. I kind of do most of my images in 4/3. Now, why do I have that? Get off. There. Okay. So let's kind of zoom in. I want the diagonal here, you see. So do I take the top of the door? Do I leave it? I don't know. Okay, let's have the top of the door. Now, black and white. So what do we need? We need, well, the color equalizer. I will switch on another instance, which I will rename black and white for the color calibration, go into grey. Oh, change to Ilford. What does it change really? Well, not much, quite honestly, because we have so much control with the of the tones with other modules. Right, so filmic now. This is the order I will do things in. Let's have a look at that automatically. Now I can't go too bright here because I'm going to lose information in the highlights. So usually I just do automatic for the whites and for the blacks. I actually want to protect some detail in the coat there and in the clothes. I won't go further than that. Let's see if we can add a bit of contrast. I actually would like a little bit of contrast there, so that's not too bad. I did switch on, well, I thought I'd switched on the color equalizer, which I'll insert in, well, just before the black and white, and go onto the skin. And actually, that's working quite well for me. So just to remind you, it's just brightness. That's all it is, brightness. And I kind of have this U shape with the skin colors brightened, and to make it not, well, to avoid flattening the image, I've actually darkened in the middle of the curve there. Right, now we need to add a lot more sculptural light to this. I think I'd like to start with the exposure module for a change. So I think I'd like to add a global vignette. If I do this by hand, rename, usually VG vignette, take a pen tool, the ellipse, and I think I want to have this. I'm pressing on Shift and Control here to turn the shape. Let's click on that, make it a bit longer. You see, I want to kind of enhance the diagonal there. That's too big. You want to just kind of get something like that, and then bring down the feather size until I can actually see it somewhere. Don't forget to invert the shape, and then add some vignette. Yeah, that's not too bad. Now, it's still a little bit flat. I think I'd like to darken this corner around here. How can I do this? I'd like to darken around this area here, this area, or basically around here. I want to darken that. I want to darken that. Yeah, well, that's about it. Okay, so new instance of exposure. I'll rename that to ND filter. So I know when I want to modify things, I have the names and I know what I'm doing. ND filters for me are made with the gradient tool. So the idea now will be to kind of get some kind of decent gradient. Press on M, check what I'm doing. I'm darkening the street. Let's add another one here. Now you can make them individually more or less opaque by clicking on Control and the mouse wheel. You can change the feathering. I don't want to go too far over the lady. The orientation, and you can also change the curve. I'm pressing on Command on the Mac there. Oh, well, while I'm at it, come on. This is actually, I think, one way to do it. I can't go further than that, which is a pity. Sometimes I'd like to go really far. And I think I'll increase the feathering just a little bit. Right, next mask. What did I say? I wanted to go around here. I'm actually building, you noticed, I'm building a new vignette, but with kind of a lot of control over what's happening. There we are. And I'll build another one up here. And I might bend that one. Not because I'm interested in this corner. Oh, where did that go? But I'm interested in this corner. There, something like that. Remove mask. Click on this, get rid of those. You notice I've lost the highlight cursor. Oh, I don't know if that's better. Tell me in the comments if you find it better with the highlight cursor or whether it's useless. And I also have this keycaster thing, which is supposed to be casting, but so that means that when I press on the keyboard, it shows you down here, but if I use the modifiers, it doesn't work. Anyway, exposure, and here you can go down as far as you like. Right. Well, that's modeled a little bit better. Now I think I want to get some local contrast on the coat there. Now I'm going to make a new exposure um, module. I'm going to call this rename. I'll call this leopard print. Leopard. Now I don't really have an easy way to mask this, so I think I'm just going to go for just a drawn mask and kind of go round somewhere like this. I'm going to ignore the hand. I'm going to cut around there, kind of go around there, right click. Obviously, that is too big. If I show the mask and feather radius, and then you can see what's happening. And then if I want to avoid touching the hand too much, bring this in a little bit, I can actually add a parametric mask and remove, look, or some of the hand. I'm not going to remove it all, but as I said, I'm not really bothered. Otherwise, I'd do another drawn mask and I'd subtract it in the mask manager, and that'd be fine. And then I'm going to draw another mask around this coat. So I'm still in the exposure, leopard, get a new shape, and kind of go around here. I'm occasionally pressing on control in the corners there to get a nice sharp edge. And here, some control. You can always catch this up later if you forgot to do it. Just press on control on one of the nodes. So mask. Well, actually, that's not too bad. There we are. So I have actually done nothing at all, but if I want to see what I've done, I can actually increase, you see, I can increase the exposure. Maybe I'd have to sort out this hand later. But what I want to do now is go on to diffuse and sharpen, and let's try dehaze extra contrast. So this is just for the leopard print, and leopard print exposure leopard. So that is just changing, just enhancing, kind of making it obvious to everyone that, oh, look, it's the same print. So there's something going on there. Maybe I want to enhance. I quite like the idea of this streak going in here. Maybe add some extra contrast. I'm going to do diffuse and sharpen. I'm going to go to one of my local contrast. Maybe on the high, and that might be enough. There we are. So I'm enhancing that local contrast high. Now the blacks, I've lost the blacks a little bit. So I will go into parametric. Switch on M for masks. And I'm going to remove the very darks from that, so that they are not touched by this local sharpening, local contrast, I mean. So what do I have before and after? I did say I'd show you that I had a style for this. So I'm going to duplicate this original, get the original. And here in my styles, I have something called basic black and white, which does that to it. It would need to get the rotate and perspective done. I can do that. So that's not in the style, and the cropping isn't in the style either. you can crop. There we are. And that gives me a starting point. So what does it do? Well, it gives me the color calibration, color equalizer with the skin. This is the U shape, and the black and white above. I have the lens deblur, lens sharpening, which I do before printing. Clarity and highlights usually gives me a bit of pop in the highlights. But you see, I didn't actually use that when I was editing, but it is interesting here actually. So maybe I could put that back. You see, in that part, I get some detail, local contrast, just a medium amount, some local contrast with the contrast equalizer, which gives this thing a little bit different. Color balance RGB and black and white will just give me extra contrast. There we are. And that means I don't have to work on Filmic so much. But when I do it by hand, I do most of it with Filmic, as you saw. So that gives me a start. It also adds on lens correction and denoise. So that's a time saver. There we are. You can just save anything you've made as a style. It's dead easy. Right, there we are. I've forgotten that. I had promised it. So now it is goodbye and see you later.